Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you've just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, we are returning in the new year with our Quick Build series. We'll be exploring a briefly summarized character build for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and as always with our quick builds, let me know in the comments below if there are ever any specific character builds you'd like to see me explore in the future. The concept for our build today comes from the user Thayer Family 5039. I hope I pronounced the name right at least. But they wanted to see a Darkwing Duck build in Dungeons & Dragons. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to admit I have never actually seen Darkwing Duck / DuckTales. I know of the shows and of the cartoons in general, but I'm by no means an expert on any of the characters in the show. So for this build, I did do a little bit of preliminary research in order to try and keep our build accurate to the character, but if I'm way off base though, feel free to yell at me in the comments. For our Darkwing build though, there are a couple things that we want to try and get in order to actually feel like Darkwing Duck and not just any regular old crime fighter. See, since Darkwing is already sort of a spoof on classic vigilantes like Batman, the Green Hornet, the Shadow, we want to make sure that we can distinguish ourselves from any build that would do those sort of things. There'll be a lot of overlap, but we want to feel like Darkwing Duck, not just a crime-fighting vigilante. Admittedly though, a lot of that will be roleplay based, and it would just be from the energy we bring to the table, not necessarily all based on our mechanics. Looking at Darkwing and what we need to sort of recreate the actual character themselves, we need at least some level of intelligence. Darkwing can be a little goofy and a bit absurd at times, but the idea is that they're a crime fighter who's also able to solve crimes and think at least a little bit outside the box in order to save the day. We're going to want some martial arts because we will need to actually fight bad guys from time to time. And of course, we're also going to want some gadgets since we want to be able to catch the bad guys and overcome as many obstacles as possible. And an array of gadgets is the best way to do that. And finally, we're of course going to want some signature vehicles, if that's possible to get in D&D. Specifically vehicles like the Ratcatcher, Darkwing's motorcycle. That will hopefully help us speed around whatever area we're in, able to stop crime as quickly as possible. Now before we start into the actual level breakdown of our build, there's one quick first option that I wanted to talk about, because with most of our builds, there's more than one way to go about them. Technically, since Darkwing is a martial arts expert, we could just go monk. Monk is actually an excellent recreation of a vigilante or a hero that chooses to physically fight crime with their fists. They have martial arts, literally, just like a lot of superheroes or vigilantes do. That means our unarmed strikes would already be taken care of if we wanted to actually get in a fist fight. We'd also be able to pick up key points and use some various key abilities that could act like pseudo superpowers, or at least abilities that a vigilante might have. And especially for Darkwing, if we went Monk and specifically Shadow Monk for our subclass, plus maybe dipped a few levels into Inquisitive Rogue, strictly for flavor of course, that would be a good martial artist / detective character that really fits the bill. They would be really good at nighttime and in darkness, the way Darkwing is supposed to fight crime. That's just one generic option. You don't have to go with it if you don't want to. For the actual build that we're going with, we're still going to be probably keeping some levels of the Inquisitive Rogue, since that kind of clears the detective or crime solver aspect of our vigilante hero. We're going to want to pick up some other stuff in order to get the full array of what we need. Now without further ado, let's get dangerous. Starting off our build and character creation, we're going to look at our lineage first. There are two main options to pick from. Of course, I'm going to go with one, but I wanted to mention them both, because this is kind of dependent on what sort of theme you want to run with your Darkwing Duck character. What I mean by that is, if you wanted to actually be more realistic and feel like you were the embodiment of Darkwing Duck but in a fantasy realm, you'd probably want to go Aarakocra. Our build though, I'm going to go custom lineage. And the reason I'm going custom lineage isn't to say that we're still a bird folk, but rather to say that we are literally a cartoon. Custom lineage lets us do a lot of things, and since we're already sort of pushing the boundaries of what's going to be in D&D by trying to recreate Darkwing Duck here, we might as well go the full 9 yards and say that we are straight up the cartoon version of the character. For our build with custom lineage, we're going to get a +2 to 1 ability score of our choice. We could get Dark Vision or a skill. I'd say probably pick the skill here because we're going to be a really skilled character anyways. So to get as many of them as possible would be pretty neat. Though dark vision does kind of make sense since we want to be able to see in the dark in order to fight crime. But we might be able to pick up dark vision another way later on. We also get to choose our size for custom lineage, and this is kind of important. We're going to say that we're small because I think a cartoon duck would probably be small if they were brought into the physical world. You can of course change it, but mechanically we're probably going to want to be small for a little later down the road. And finally we get a free feat, and our free feat is going to be Mounted Combatant of all things. Mounted Combatant is going to really help us out when we eventually get our Rat Catcher motorcycle. Stats, they're pretty straightforward. We're not doing anything fancy with them. We just want, after point buy, 8 strength, 14 dexterity, 12 constitution, 16 intelligence, 14 wisdom, and 10 charisma. That's just 7 points into dexterity, intelligence, and wisdom, and then the remaining 4 and 2 points into constitution and charisma. For our background, you can pick absolutely anything that lets you feel like a superhero type character, or a vigilante, or a crime fighter. Jumping into the level breakdown of our build now, we're just looking at the first 10 levels really, and that's mainly just going to consist of Artificer and Inquisitive Rogue, like we said. We want to take our first 3 levels in Artificer so that way we can get right up to our subclass as quick as possible. And for our subclass, we want to go Battlesmith. The reason we want Battlesmith is because, number 1, it lets us use our intelligence for our attack and damage rolls when wielding a magic weapon, so that's pretty nice for us. And then we also get our Steel Defender, and we're going to do the neat little combo of having our Steel Defender be quadrupedal instead of bipedal, and because it's a medium-sized creature, we can ride it around as a mount. And because we have Mounted Combatant, we're just going to be very good. And because we have Mounted Combatant, we're definitely going to want to be doing that. I'm going to take this time to think of our Steel Defender more as our Ratcatcher motorcycle than an actual ally in combat, and I think we'd rather use it to just speed around the battlefield as much as possible rather than worry about it actually dealing any damage out. We're more interested in its movement speed and its reaction deflect attack to impose disadvantage when we're getting attacked in melee combat. The reason this is so nice is because the deflect attack reaction, we have to admittedly be within 5 feet of an enemy in order to use it. But because we're riding our Steel Defender or Ratcatcher motorcycle already, if the Ratcatcher gets attacked, we can use Mounted Combatant to just say that we actually get attacked. And then we can use the deflect attack reaction from our motorcycle to just give that attack disadvantage, which is really, really nice. The one thing I will say though is that for our infused item, because Darkwing has a lot of various guns, grappling hooks, and those types of things, we're mainly going to want to make use of the replicate magic item infusion, but you're probably going to want to pick up a magic item for yourself to use in combat, and whether that's a melee weapon or you want to pick up a crossbow and take repeating shot and maybe even get Crossbow Master eventually, I'll leave that up to you. Ideally though, we do want the weapon to be finesse in some way because we're going to be adding sneak attack on it over the next few levels. After we've picked up our Ratcatcher motorcycle from Battlesmith and gotten a few gadgets and now we can use our intelligence for our attacks instead of dexterity, it's time to jump over to Rogue. Rogue will allow us to become much more skilled with its expertise features. We also gain a little bit more damage from sneak attack, and we also gain other various abilities like cunning action if we need to be the ones moving or hiding or doing other things ourselves, while most of the time we're probably going to be okay just using our Ratcatcher for mobility by zipping around the battlefield. We're going to pick up Inquisitive Rogue when we reach total level 6. And Inquisitive Rogue is just purely for flavor. You don't actually have to pick up Rogue if you don't want to, and you don't have to pick up Inquisitive. It just feels appropriate that we would be more of a detective-style character, which the Inquisitive Rogue is meant to be. It's going to make us a very observant character with a well-trained eye. able to easily pick out crime and solve any sort of case that is thrown at us. When we hit level 7, we get our first ASI/feat, and you can go ahead and pick whatever you want here. There's really no feat or ability score improvement that's going to synergize really well. Just boosting our stats is always nice, and picking up any feat is also a good choice too. At level 8, we get Uncanny Dodge, and then right after that, we go back to Artificer for levels 9 and 10 to finish off getting extra attack as well as another ability score improvement or feat from Artificer. Levels 11 and up, all we're doing now is just trying to grab the other aspects of Darkwing Duck that we sort of missed out on. Now, honestly, that's just the martial arts. We've got the intelligence to be able to solve crimes, or at least the relative intelligence to do it. We've got gadgets from being an artificer and artificer utility spells, which can act like gadgets in their own right. And we have our Ratcatcher vehicle as our Steel Defender. In all honesty, there's not much of a level breakdown that I would really recommend going for because you can kind of do what you want. If you really wanted exact martial arts, then you could multi-class into Monk, take a few levels there to get some interesting abilities. Again, Shadow Monk is pretty appropriate. But because that would kind of make us more of an absurd character, what I'd probably recommend doing is just sticking with Rogue and Artificer, going maybe up to Rogue 7 to get Evasion, Artificer 12 in order to get the ability score improvement and a lot of good Artificer abilities, then also grabbing one level of Fighter. With Fighter, we can pick up the unarmed fighting style to allow our punches to actually have a relatively good damage die size when we do punch an enemy, and we have a little bonus to grappling as well. And then we can go back to one of our Artificer infusions and create a pair of Gauntlets of Ogre Strength in order to actually back up that punching fighting style. Other than that though, the choice is totally up to you how you want to spend the rest of the levels for the Darkwing build. So now it's time to summarize our build. Overall, we're certainly a hero with gadgets and gizmos. The main regret for this Darkwing build is that it's really hard to combine the martial arts prowess that Darkwing is supposed to have with the gadgets he can pick up from being an artificer. You could technically multi-class into Monk like I said, or you could of course pick up the Gauntlets of Ogre Strength like the way I sort of suggested we should do, just to be a bit more mechanically sound. And even technically going into just the Armorer Artificer would also sort of work, but then we'd lose out on our little gimmick of riding around the battlefield on our Steel Defender while being protected by it. Also, I will say that I really like the use of custom lineage for this build to become a cartoon character. It's just so quirky and silly to think about the actual cartoon Darkwing Duck running around a D&D world. Of course, it might break some people's immersion, but I think it's a funny concept for a character that could really tie in other various storylines or other sort of multiverse stuff if you wanted to get into that. Let me know what you thought of the build, or what you would do to get closer to the concept of Darkwing Duck. Perhaps there's something I missed, or maybe the build even inspires you to create other crime-fighting superheroes in D&D. Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.